Hi guys, and welcome to a new video. So today's video is going to be a bit different because we're not actually going to be talking about how to play the drums. I'm not going to be teaching you any new licks or anything, but I want to talk about how to record drums and specifically how to make big drums sound big in a small room. So I was recently contacted by a client to record some drums, and specifically they asked for some big sounding drums. And in a room like this, it's quite challenging to get a big sound. So while these mics are all set up the way they are, I just thought I'd walk you through what I did. So let's just dive in and talk about the drums firstly. Okay, so the first thing I want to mention is the drum kit itself. Like I said, the client wanted big drums, so I've got a big old 28-inch bass drum here. I've actually just got a normal kind of 5.5 by 14 snare drum, but I've tuned it so it's kind of detuned sounding, so it's got a lot of overtones, but it sounds really good. And so that's the snare drum, and then for the hi-hats I've actually just got my two crash cymbals. I've got a 21-inch crash cymbal on top and a 19 on the bottom, which sounds really sloshy, and you know, I would never normally use this, but it sounds kind of cool, I think. And I've got a big old 24-inch ride here as a crash, basically. I've put it to the back of the room, which is where I normally store everything, hence the mess everywhere. But the reason I did this is because it's at the back of the room, firstly. So, you know, this is where we're going to put the room mics. It's going to be the opposite side of the room, but I'll talk about that in a bit. So, distance firstly, and it's actually because there's not as much foam anywhere. So, even on the ceiling, there's no foam. The back of the wall towards the bottom of the floor, there's no foam either. So, it's a lot more reflective. That's going to help make the drums sound a lot bigger. So before you even think about anything, think about where you're going to put the kit in the room and experiment. You know, put it in the corner, put it in the middle of the room, find out where it sounds the best and the biggest for your recording, and then go with that. And that's a great starting point for your recording. So yeah, if you're recording big drums, try to start with big sounding drums. You know, I'm lucky enough to have this marching bass drum, but you know, if you didn't have that and you just had a normal kick drum, you could just start off by taking out the muffling. We use a big fluffy beater to enhance the kind of low end a wee bit. Detune it, you know, tune it low. Use ride cymbals as hi-hats, things like that. Make it sound real low and sloppy, and that's, you know, that's going to carry in the microphones. You know, start off with a good source of sound before you even talk about microphones. Okay, so let's move on to the drum mics. So I've got two categories of drum mics. I've got essentially the close mics, which are the ones near the drum kit, obviously. And we've got the room mics, which I'll talk about in a second. They're basically at the other side of the room to capture the ambience of the room. To begin with, let's follow this microphone stand all the way up, and we'll find a Rode NT1A at the top there. So this is the mono overhead that I've got here. So I've decided to go mono because I've got two room mics at the back of the room that are going to give me the stereo width. So I'm using this to basically capture the cymbals, the snare drum, the whole kit, and it's a nice cohesive sound because it's all from the same mic. And if you play correctly and you mix yourself so you don't bash the cymbals and then tap the snare, it'll sound great with that one mic if you want it. Like I said, near the ceiling where there's no foam, so that's going to capture a bit of reflection as well. That's the reason I've got it so high, is so it can capture a bit more ambience and it will capture more of the whole kit. Moving on to the bass drum, I've got an AKG mic, a couple of feet away from the bass drum. As you can see, it's not as close as you might assume, and that's because actually I found this is the good place for it, because you know you have to fiddle around with different bass drums, and for that bass drum it's a bit too mental if it's right next to the head, so I brought it back and that's where the low end is. And for the attack, I've actually got a second bass drum mic, which I'll just show you now. So this is the second bass drum mic. It's actually at the other side of the kick, as you can see where the pedal is, and I've got my fluffy beater. So this one's basically pointed at the attack point of the beater, so that's going to capture a lot more attack and not much low end. You know, it'll do the job, and it's great because you can blend the two. You can add more low end with the outside mic, and you can add some more attack with this mic here. So the only other thing that I've mic'd up on this kit in terms of close mics is the snare drum. So we've got a snare top and a snare bottom. So this snare top is actually an SM57 clone made by Stag. It's actually really good. It's, you know, about a third of the price, and it means that I've got two of them instead of one of the SM57s. Obviously you can't replicate perfectly the SM57, but this does a pretty good job, and it's great for low budget studios or just home recording. For the bottom of the snare, I've just got a pencil condenser. This thing's really cheap again, but it's really good actually. Just got to give it a bit of EQ to get the high end out. But if you've just got a pencil condenser, that'll work great for the bottom of the snare because it will capture that high end and articulation that you need for the snare drum. If you've only got the one snare drum mic, you should try just miking up the bottom of the snare, because a lot of the snare is going to be captured by the room mics and the overheads, and you can just use this bottom snare drum mic for the articulation if you need it. So try that out and see how you get on. Okay, so let's talk about room mics now. And let's firstly talk about this bad boy. So this isn't really a room mic, and it's not really a close mic. It's somewhere in the middle, I guess. This is a Shure Prologue, a vintage Shure mic. It's not great. I got it for about £20, just because I thought, ooh, a cheap Shure mic. Yeah, go for it. And it's not great. So what I've done is I've put this in the middle of the room, pointing straight at the drum kit. And what I'm going to do with this mic is basically slap a load of compression on it, and it's going to turn into a really distorted, really gritty sounding microphone. And it's going to be great to blend into your mix. It's just something nice to have. You don't need to have it by any means, but since I've got it, I may as well use it, you know what I mean? So that's going to be fun, and I'll show you how that sounds later on. So for the actual room mics, what I've done is I've got my pair of Samson CO2 mics, which are, usually I use them as overheads. They're just, again, pencil condensers, not very expensive again. But I've put these at the very top and back of the room, so opposite the drum kit. So if we look to the left as well, we'll see the other microphone at the other side of the room there. So again, that's facing the drum kit. So these are our room mics, and these are placed at the back of the room at opposite sides, and that's, like I said, going to give us the stereo width that we want. So we're going to pan these hard left and right, and that's going to create a nice width. So there is a couple of things you could do differently with the room mics. So I've got two at the back of the corner, like I said, but you can face them either towards the kit or towards the wall. So I've compared the two, and I've just put it into like a kind of loop so you can hear the difference. So that's everything in terms of what the mics are doing and how it's all set up. Let's move over to the laptop where we're going to talk about mixing and things. Okay, so I've got a loop here, and I'm just going to let you hear how just the raw drums sound. So I think it sounds quite cool as is, so I've done nothing to it. I've just panned the room mics left and right, so you've got that width, and then that's all I've done to it. So it sounds really cool, and it sounds really natural, which I like. So that's the kind of sound I'm going for, is a natural sound, so I'm not actually going to do too much in terms of processing, like I said. What I'll do now is I'll just solo some of these microphones, so you can hear the room mics, the close mics, and see how they sound individually, and then we'll start to mix it. So now you've got an idea of how these different microphones sound, let's start to mix them. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you a nice wee trick that you can do if you've not got room mics, let's say, and you want to add some ambience. So I'm actually going to do this to the proper mix as well. So what we're going to do is take the close mics, the kick front, the back kick, the snare top, the snare bottom, and we'll also take the overhead as well. And we're going to send this, we're going to click on send, and we're going to send it to bus 1. And we'll do that just now. So that's created a bus for us, and then what we're going to do is just alt click on that little nubbin there, and that'll send it all equally. And this is going to be our reverb channel, so I'm just going to rename that aux track as reverb. I'll just call it rev. So what we've done now is we've basically sent the close mics to this auxiliary send. So you know, just all the close mics. And what we're going to do now is we're going to add a reverb to it. So I'm just going to go on reverbs, you know, just use the standard. Let's go Space Designer and we'll put it in stereo. And then let's pick, let's say, medium spaces. I'm just kind of making this up. Parking garage, let's go for that. It's nice 1.4 seconds. And I'm going to put the reverb to the max. And this will sound quite spacey because it's just going to be nothing but reverb. So let's hear it. Sounds really cool. And so what we're going to do with that is we're actually going to blend that aux track in to add some reverb to the rest of the microphones. So before I do that, I'm going to actually take away some of the bass drum because it can be a bit overpowering with reverb on it. So I'm going to take a lot of this bass drum out and just leave the snare and the overheads. And that's going to be it. So still sounds pretty beefy, but we'll mix it in. So this is how it sounds, just as is, no mixing. So I've just kind of blended it in and I'm just trying to find the sweet spot where it's not overpowering but it just adds a bit more space. I'm actually going to take the snare drum out a wee bit because it's again a bit overpowering and that should be good. So that's the first thing you can do to, you know, add space to your drum kit. If you don't have room mics and you've just got a couple mics, that's a great way to simulate a space. Is just send things to a reverb track and then just blend it in. And you can do that with distortion, you can do it with compression, you know, it's anything goes really. So have some fun and, you know, experiment with it. So let's have some fun with this gritty mic. So I didn't really gain stage it properly, so I wasn't that bothered because I want it to be noisy and messy anyway. So it's kind of quiet. So let's just slap a compressor on it. Dynamics compressor, do that. And let's just see how it sounds. Let's crank the ratio up. And we'll also add some slow, quick attack and quick release as well. So make it really kind of crazy. And let's just slam the ratio up, you know. Nice, so that sounds immediately kind of trashy and cool. So we can blend that in. Nice. So because I'm going for a natural sound, I actually want to take away a lot of the snare drum, the close mics and the snare drum. And that's because a lot of this is getting captured in the room and the overhead, so you know it doesn't really, you know, it doesn't really work with the sound I'm going for because, you know, I don't want just a really nice clean snare drum sound when everything else is kind of a room sound, you know what I mean? So I'm going to take a lot of this out. Cool, so that's basically it. For the kick drums, I'm going to do very minimal things here. So first thing, I'm going to just get the front kick drum and add a bit of bass to it. So I'm just going to go in the EQ and just add, you know, I actually don't want to use the shelf. I'm going to use this and just add a bit around the kind of sub zone. You know, I want this to feel quite meaty. And I'm also going to take away a bit of the kind of 200 to 300 zone because this is this kind of muddy zone. So I'm going to take away a bit of that, just like that. So I'll just let you hear that front. Sounds nice and beefy. And the back. So like I said, that's got all the attack basically. So I'm actually going to put a gain thing on here because this is actually, I found out before I started recording, this is actually out of phase with the front bass drum head, my bad. So I just put on a gain plugin, which is under utility and gain. And all I did was just phase invert, and that will get it back in phase with everything else. So if you're finding that your drums are sounding a bit lackluster, try messing around with the gain plugin and see if there's anything out of phase. So that's the first thing I did. And then what I'll do is, again, I'll just take away, ooh, I don't want the compressor, do not want the compressor in that. Take away, again, a bit of that 200 zone, I think it was around here. And a tiny bit of high end. This is very minimal stuff, you know, I'm not trying to do much. And I'm also going to take away a bit of the low end because the other microphone is covering that, just so it doesn't get overpowered. So for me, that's basically all I'm going to be doing. Maybe take away a bit of the room mics because they're quite hot, but you know, that's about it. I'm not doing much, you know, I'm trying to make this natural sounding. I've got my reverb bus, I've got my trashy gritty mic for, you know, added character. And the only thing I would do is, in this case I'm adding it to the master, right? But, you know, if you're doing a bigger session, just add it to your drum bus. But I'm going to put a compressor on the whole of the kit, just to make it glue together nicely. So again, I'm using the nice, I like this one for some reason, it just adds a bit more grittiness I've found. So, nothing crazy. Cool. So that compressor just glues everything nicely together, and if you do compress things with reverb, the reverb will be pushed up. So again, you don't have to add too much reverb if you're compressing it later on, because the reverb will be compressed and then it'll become a lot louder in the mix. So that's about it. Like I said, I've not done much at all, barely anything. I've added compression and a bit of EQ and reverb, and that's it. So if you do the work with the drum kit and the mic setup, you barely have to do anything in the box, which is nice. Okay, so that about wraps up the video. I hope you enjoyed it and learnt something from it. Obviously this is a bit different from the other content on my channel, but I thought I'd, you know, do this video while all the microphones are set up. So if you did enjoy this and you want to hear more about kind of how to record drums, just drop a comment below and I'll make some more videos on it if you want, you know, any requests or anything. And also I'm going to put the Logic file of just those 2 loops in the description so you can download it and you can see and compare the things for yourself. Also, I'll probably record a wee channel update video because I'm going to start doing scheduled videos, so you have like a bit of a, so there's consistency in the videos. It's not just like 3 a week and then none for a month, you know. So I'm going to try to make it more consistent for you guys, and so I'll do a little update video on that soon as well. So keep an eye out for that, but until then, take care.